illustrated by the letter Y.
So I want to share that screen there.
By the letter Y, and the focus point is the red circle. The red circle. Yeah. The focus point is then what brings the two aspects together. That means that the Y visualizes a tree where the trunk represents sameness and the branches differences. In short, the whole is seen as a both and, but you cannot have one at a part. You have to think about that it's a one, it's a whole, and it's a new sign on a new level, so to speak. So then, what are life showers? For the utterer, life showers are sense-based systems for discriminating between and clustering of perceptions that come from other utterances of communication. For utterers, life genres are means for meaning making. For a species, a shared resource system. So it's for the species. We have to lift the thinking from the utterer and from the receiver up to the species. The species that had this capacity and has developed the ability to fiddle with the genre. A temporary conclusion. I'm not concluding totally. This is just looking into it. Uttering and interpreting should no longer be seen as just sequential, as is the main tradition in ethology, from where I get my empirical stuff. Although asymmetric, the two roles nevertheless seem to generate a dialogical integrated system. And a core element, a pivot point, so to speak, or I also like to call it a communication roundabout, because it's captured and it can be sent in different directions or in different kind of genres, is then life genres. Here, I have nothing, because after hearing Chris' wonderful presentation, and also Eric's, I decided that I should not focus so much on the sociology of the development of sociological thinking in ethology, because I will write that into the article. Now it's more important to focus on a very particular point, which is in the reference in the abstract. Gontier and Pina go through different approaches within ethology to see what is the status of that field. And you can see a clear drift to sociologization, to context, to intercultural, to sameness, to systemic thinking. So that's a change that has come about the last 15 years or so. So that leads us to the social dimension and its relation to mind. Some years ago, I found a book that was called Social, Why Our Brain is Wired to Connect. It's written by Matthew Lieberman, who has a research team in the US, and is supposed to be a leading neuroscientist. He takes a combined evolutionary and neurological approach, focusing three major mechanisms. He assumes, call it processes, stages, or faculties, and they are developed in steps over time, which means it's steps over time for the organism, but it's at the same time and in the same way also the steps in evolution. And he called them connecting. And the example he's using connecting is the mother-offspring relationship for mammals, a very close relationship at the start, and they start to interact with each other. After a while, they will be able to do. He doesn't like the word mind reading, but he still thinks it's a kind of common understanding between the two parts and also within the wider community of the species. And the last step is harmonizing. I don't think it means that it will be harmonized. It's coming together as a system for the species. And he says, at least in mammals and eventually in great apes and humans. So that's his main intro to what he's going to write about in the book. But what I'm interested in is his claim that mirror system plays a key role making perception and experience social. So he connects the mirror and the social, making the same. It's through the mirror that animals who has this system can get social, in his opinion. It's only by synthesizing, and here I read very slowly because it's an interesting argument, synthesizing the complexity of movement into the simplicity of an action. So there's going on a sign process there, a shortcut. There have been similar views during those days. And this simplicity of an action can, that any psychological analysis of another's goal, intention, desires, and fears can begin. So thanks to the mirror system, he claims, we live in a world as social, full of actions, not movements, which allows us to live in a world of meaning in the life world. He then hence argues that this neurological system allows, or perhaps even forces, and here comes the perception part into. So we have now developed a new lens, so to speak, that forces to not to be driven by the determined aspects of genes, but rather into what I think Alexis would say is agency. So they've got a tool that you can handle part of your life yourself. The mirror system chops up the world of living movements into pieces and repackages them, and that's the interesting part, them into the psychological elements that the mental listening system can work from. There are some key steps in my thinking here. If we start from Peirce's interpreted, which is a very tricky concept or understanding for people coming from communication. We start from that and simply says, but at least the interpret in some way are in acts, in utterances. So that's the first point. The second level is when you act or utter, the acting happens by addressing, like I address you now, to others. That's the second level of steps. The third is that uttering and interpreting are in the outset an individual process. But because the community cluster it and makes it into a system, it becomes shared. But it's not used for utterers and interpreters in the same way. There is a what some of you would say affordance or a scaffolding or a source, as Halliday says, and it's pretty much the same to me. Then it becomes sociologically shared by a species. The last point here is that the species' complete set of life genres will, through communication, establish a society by which the social dimension, and this is my key point, the social dimension becomes a key component in the subject's life world, along with self and world, which is the conclusion is that I ask this community to think whether the social dimension, which means society, should be brought into the definition of Lebenswelt, not just Innenwelt and Außenwelt, but also society, to make a whole, I would say, in the life world. Because at the higher stage in evolution, it's such a possible freedom to have an agency to use that kind of system to survive in the struggle for life. Follow the blue lines and you will see that there is a sociological dimension going through any step in or any level in the thinking. So that's make it coherent from a Bakhtinian or from a Hallidayan or from a Habermasian perspective, from my perspective too. So that creates a line that will be there in any signification process. This brings us, if we take a step back, to a conflict between speculative grammar, which is the name Peirce gave his own approach. Speculative grammar. Speculative grammar is also Saussure, it's Halliday, his grammar, and the framework I use. It's only an essence of what you think is important. So we have this conflict or kind of dividing up in speculative grammar on one hand and pragmatics on the other hand. We have different versions of this: skeleton versus body, body versus context, la langue versus parole, the map versus terrain, etc., etc. Here I will bring a person into discussion that is controversial, but before this presentation I reread Morris. I had it in the past, and I find in his writing, for our purposes, communication will be limited to the use of science to establish a commonage, and the commonage is also a similar term in Peirce's writing. Commonage with the signification, the establishment of a commonage other than that of signification, whether by science or other means, will be called, and make this funny word, communization, with a Z. But he goes on, in the glossary, he says much shorter and perhaps more important. Communication is the arousing of common significata by the production of science. He further argues that because communication is the establishment of temporary similarity between the interpretants and the communicator and communicatee, the problem of communication itself is how to attain this similarity. By that, he says that communication is just as important as signification, as I interpret it. So, back to this figure here, you have the signification. If you're thinking grammar, and I have a grammar as a background and applied linguistics, we think in that, or you get a way of thinking about the phenomena in the world, but it's handicapped because it doesn't have at the same time the communicational way of looking at things. So you need both. You need to bring them together to understand each of these phenomena down here, the pragmatics up here. So I came from linguistics and I went to applied linguistics, and this field should think about going from biosemiotics to applied biosemiotics. What kind of use can you have of this, all these wonderful theories that we have? And I think part of the problem is that what you actually get out with in the theories are just essence. Not the real thing, just essence of some phenomena. There is a rest that we forget because you take this essence and use that on particular studies on particular stories. So we should put all this together as a whole. So genres are kinds of utterance and hence kinds of communication that serve a specific species' need for life functions. Second, life genres are habitual and Kalevi, you understand what we have a kind of, we haven't discussed it, but it's interesting what you have written. So I would just call it habitual. Are not seen as by me as habits. I'm not saying that habits is not right, but they are habitual because they are dynamic. Sorry, they are genres because they are dynamic, communicational, semiotic, and social. All the four criteria at once. Communication on the level of genre functions by signs as elements in utterance, and finally. Communication is seen as the key driving force when establishing and developing an individual subjective life world. I would like to tell you that my spouse, of course, before she had an operation, was not able to find the words. But at the same time, we were watching Aida for 4 hours together, and of course, she knew all the genre elements, and she also gave a comment to a doctoral student's her thesis. And so the passive genre sense was there, fully understandable, just as a person who cannot speak, or just a little child that little by little can catch the genre. So we are close to ending. Some short sentences. Life genres are systemic. It's not a system. It's systemic because it's open, partly open. Second, as a set, all the genres within a species are constitute a species communicational system and also its life world. The last point is then that if there are no life genres, there are no life world. And I would like to, as I started in Australia, I would like to end in Australia. I'm presenting this in 1991 at the genre conference in Sydney. And I presented my first idea about genres. And some people come up to me, and there were Aussies. And back in the room, there were some people waiting. And when the Aussies disappeared, a group of Aboriginal female women, teachers, come up to me with, I wouldn't say tears in the eyes, but they were really sad. And they said to me, when you said, when genres die, society dies as well. And she looked me in the eyes and said, that's what happens to us. Thanks.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. Yeah.
Do you think imitation plays a role in what you have said? Because your remarks about genres reminds me of what Merlin Donald said about the use of mimicry in the evolution.
It's only part of the similarity part. It's the theme rime element. You have the similarity part, but every time you utter or act, you will have always a new part, which is the rime part. That's my answer. So yes, it's a part of it, but it's just a little part of it. Eric.
Life genres are composed of signs. Signs are the building blocks that make up the elements in the life genre. But I'd be curious to hear if we would also include such things as non-intentional signs or meaningful action where there is no addressee. And if you would agree with that, you would include those things, such as non-intentional. Then, of course, you get into the problem. Then what is not in this category?
I think the answer is very general. My key my key concept is utterance. There I follow Bakhtin. So it depends where you set the limits for an utterance and not. Peirce will accept thoughts as dynamic too, but I say that utterance has to be uttered in a society. So therefore, I set the limit there. So, well, it's a good question because it's some necessary thinking you have to do to separate the thinking from that kind of questions. So that's my spontaneous answer. We might discuss further later. Aaron.
Reminded of a lot of experience and knowledge that exists in developmental psychology about rhythms.
Hello.
Rhythms, which children are raised.
Oh.
Habitual small movements that are repeated and that are correct, that are planted into patterns and shared rituals and music as also part of the what you have mentioned, the simplification interactions. So there is a huge parallel available. I would think that this might be very interesting to see how evolutionary processes between species might also be paralleled in socialization.
I just agree with you. Yeah. Can I, before you cut off, can I some more question? I just want to say one thing before I leave. I presented this part of this in Warsaw at the, last year, and one question to me: why do you use this funny word genre? And I think my answer was like this. If you Google, and you should Google genre, you will find one, not million, but 1 billion hits. 1 billion hits. So genre is one of the most important concepts in establishing new kind of societies going on. Not only that, but the curricula for all first languages all over the world are stuffed with genres that the kids are supposed to know. And not only the genres within the school, it continues up in the educational system. That's why genre is so important. To me, genre in this presentation is only interesting in terms of how did we get this kind of phenomenon into the phenomenon of culture, human culture. Thank you.